Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop. I have many vices, but vices is not one of them. I currently have 16 woodworking vices in my shop, and that does not mean that you need 16 of them. You need one good one. That's really all you need. Maybe two if you have one that's a specialty, but you don't need all the vices. The reason I have them is I teach a class and each student needs their own vice, as well as it gives a chance for everyone to try out different things and see if there's something that they like. So what I want to do today is actually go through a few of my vices and show you what the pros and cons of each are. In general, you need to be able to hold a board in 3 different orientations so that you can work on it. If you're doing a lot of joinery, you need it up so you can work on the end. If you're doing jointing, you need to be able to hold it along the board so that you can work on the edge. And if you're flattening it or smoothing it out, you need a way to hold it on its face. Now for a small board like this one, that's not all that difficult. Most vices can hold this in all 3 orientations. But not every board is so easy. Some of them are longer, bigger, wider, deeper, thicker, and you've got to have something that can hold those. As well as sometimes you're going to come across boards that have a taper or just plain a weird shape, and you need to have a way to grab this. Probably the most affordable vice you can pick up is one of these. You can pick them up on Amazon for almost nothing. Inside there's a single screw and then 2 guide rods. And those guide rods help keep it a little bit parallel, and they're relatively stiff, but you can still see there's a little bit of racking just because they tend to be relatively affordable, and that means the components tend to be a little cheaper. But you can get an incredible amount of force on these. Now, you can generally fix that racking with an anti-racking block like this one from Rex. They actually work really well, and you can remove all that racking that causes a lot of problems. Also, you'll notice I have this on the end of my vise, and I highly recommend, especially when you're first getting out, put a vise on the end of your vise. And with it on the end of the vise, I can still clamp on boards and do the edge. Now, I am going to be kind of limited. I don't like doing boards much longer than about 4 foot in a vise like this. But it works out perfectly fine, and honestly, I don't do boards longer than 4 foot much often. And in that case, you can actually clamp them between the dogs on your bench top. So this one simple vise with 1 screw actually does really well. It's a little bit janky and sloppy, and you got to kind of work around a few things. But for the price of this, you just can't beat it with a stick. Let's move up a level. This is the twin screw vise. There are 2 screws. There are no balancing rods in here, so I have a lot more space. I can fit some very wide boards in between the screws and work on the end of them. And if they're too wide, well, it's not a problem. I just bring it out here and clamp it down on the edge. The nice thing is because there are 2 screws on here, it anti-racks, and this whole thing is incredibly solid. So when I crank it down, I've got a board out here that I can work on all the way along that edge, even though it's not between the screws. You can put these on the face of your bench, but I prefer to put it on the end again so I can use the dogs. That's why I tend to work off the end of my bench. I find that to be far more comfortable and versatile, and it works really well for me. The one downside to this is it's kind of slow. There's a chain that goes from this gear to this gear, and it's just cranky. And it's not bad, but over time, enter the twin turbo vise with all of its gizmosity. This is set up so that the screw actually moves really fast, or I can adjust it, pull this out, and now I can go at my normal speed and have more force than I would with the other one. I need to take some time and tune this one up because this bench has actually been contracting as it dries, so I got to reset the screw point. So it's a little bit stiff at the moment. But honestly, when I first put this in, everything was the right place, incredibly fast and smooth. I really love this vise. It's got all the functionality of the others, it's just faster. 2 screws balanced out, so I can do even wire boards between the screws. I've got all the functionality of all the others, but even more because it runs faster. As well as dogs that run along the bench. All the things I need in one vise. But as you know, the more better things get, the more expensive things get. And that's why I generally recommend an end face vise. It's one vise that can do everything. It can do edges and face and end grain and all of it in between. But sometimes it has a little bit of difficulty with, well, tapered items. And let's not even get started with things that aren't, well, flat and square and true. Enter the pattern maker's vise. Yes, it's still an end screw face, but it only has 1 screw in the middle. There's only one really big beefy screw in the middle. And that is enough that this thing just doesn't rack. I mean, it's a beast. But I can also loosen up these screws, and now my jaw can go out of parallel. I can also pop up some dogs and use it for that, or make them disappear. Not to mention, I can loosen this and now I can rotate it up and use this vise, or I can rotate it around and I can use this vise, or I can rotate all the way around, loosen up this weird handle over here, and now this whole thing goes up here, and I can hold anything in any orientation, in any manner at all with this vise, and it is so cool. But as with anything that gets really, really cool, it also gets really, really pricey. I've got a whole video on this thing if you want to see more. It's just a seriously cool vise, and I absolutely love it. But you've got to be willing to put down a lot of dough, like more than my first 4 cars combined. Not that my first 4 cars are worth anything. You haven't said anything about the leg vise, and you have 5 of them in your shop, soon to be 6. Part of that's just because I honestly don't use them that much. They're on the face of the bench, and I much prefer the end of the bench for working on. It's far more versatile and I can do more on it. So I don't do a whole lot on my face other than jointing long boards. In that case, I can clamp it along the face of the bench and I can do longer things a little bit lower down. I generally don't use leg vises that much. But the nice thing is you can actually build one of these for a relatively cheap price. Just understand, because you have to put it on a leg, it can't go on the end of the bench, so you can't clamp things long across your bench with dog holes. Other than that though, they still hold boards in place, and I really like them for that. But I just don't use them as much. That being said, they come in all different shapes and sizes, like this one with the old wooden screw and pin board on the bottom, to this one, which is a Hovarder vise. So it just opens up and closes. No screw required. You can stop it at any point and start cranking it down, and then it locks in place. This one also has a crisscross in there, and that means you don't need a pin board in here because this just slides in and out. But wait, it gets even weirder than this. Let me introduce you to the Cheetah vise. This is even faster. This thing just moves like unbelievably, and it can put an incredible amount of force on there. I really love this. You know, a lot of people say, "Ooh, it sticks out too far," but compared to most of my others, this actually doesn't stick out that far. It just looks like it because there's this huge void back here. This actually is the leg vise that I probably use more than any of the others, just because it's very fast, it's very efficient, and I can put a lot of force onto it. It's not so great when I want to work on the flat of a board. Clamping in the flat means it's got to be down a little bit, or I've got to work on something, and so that's its one big downside. But other than that, if I'm ever working on edge or end, I really love working with this vise. Now, when most people think about woodworking vise, they think about one of these. This is actually what I learned on. This is the vise that I cut my teeth and hand tool woodworking on. And most people plant this on the face of the bench. But again, I would rather have it on the end because this one actually has a little dog that pops up, so I can do a dog line with this vise. It's kind of like the first vise we looked at, and then it has 1 screw and 2 guide rods. But this one is far more stable. It still has a little bit of slop to it, but nowhere near as much as the other. But these are generally going to run you a little more expensive than the first one. And this particular one with the slit screw is kind of nice because it can slide in and out. Though trying to get it to engage can sometimes be a little bit tricky if you're finding that right tooth. And then, look at that, now it works. But if you can find one of these on Facebook Marketplace or an antique store somewhere, these can be a fantastic vise. You just realize that doing long things gets a little harder because there's all this stuff in the way. That then brings us to specialty vices. These are both McElcheran vices. This one is one that I made with a screw kit, and you can actually put a nut on here and a wooden screw, and it works great, and I made every single piece in this. This is a kit from Tay Tools with all of the hardware on there. I find both of them to be about the same. And the nice thing about these is they are phenomenal for working on the ends of board because they actually raise it up a little bit. If I'm doing joinery and working with a saw on the end of the board, I actually want it to be closer to my eyes so I can see what I'm doing when I'm working on it. The nice thing about a McElcheran vise is it mounts to the top of your bench and raises the work up a little bit. It's not great for doing flats, and it kind of does edges, but again, it's up so high that it becomes hard to plane the edges of your boards. But for most things, and just doing specialty work, these are phenomenal. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the hand screw clamp. The hand screw clamp is actually one of my favorites because it can go in another vise and you can clamp other things down. This allows you to very quickly work on weird shapes and weird connections, and then you can even put another hand screw into this and put one off of there. And it's just a very versatile tool that can be used all over the place. It's basically a simple vise that can be moved anywhere in the shop, and I use these all the time. I generally refer to it as a hand screw clamp, though I've heard a lot of people refer to it as a hand screw vise, and every now and then that slips out of my own mouth. So it's kind of a gray area between normal clamps and vices, But at what point does a vise no longer be a vise and becomes a clamp? I would say it has to do with when it can be moved around. If you can move it around and put it somewhere else, then it's a clamp. If it stays mounted to a bench, then it's a vise. But there are some vises that you can move around from place to place, but you generally only use them when they're clamped in a bench. And yes, at this point you start to realize why you have too many vises in your life. But all that being said, there's a reason I love a face vise on the end of a bench, because it's the most versatile. You can do everything with this. It clamps everything you would want for general woodworking, and it does it very, very well. And I think that's why I use this more than anything else. But does that mean I'm right? Well, yeah. James Wright. In the end, you have to find the style and method that works best for you. And that can be kind of fun when you're first beginning, because it's kind of difficult to get a hold of them to try it out. But that's why I say, get one of these and you don't need anything else. But then you'll hear other people say, get one of those and you don't need anything else. And a lot of people say, get one of these and you don't need anything else. And then some people say, knock them over on the bench and make everything better. So I hope you like this. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, snide remarks, throw those in the comments down below. And yes, I do enjoy the snide remarks, because they do help out the channel. Thank you. It means a lot. And anytime you do like, comment, share, subscribe, you know what it means. But if you really want to be special, amazing, beautiful, even gorgeous, think about joining those people over there. Those are some of the people on Patreon that I absolutely love, because they're the ones that support this channel. Without people on Patreon, this channel would not exist. You are the reason we're here. And we do a bunch of giveaways and other things like that for members on Patreon from time to time. So if you want to find out more about that, links down below. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. And just so you know, this one is named Roy. Yes, Viceroy. Yes. He does live in Miami.